A little bit
Little
more.
bit less.
That's probably that's getting
good.
pretty close right in there.
Let's
think.
try that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're good. That's much better. Yep.
I thought mine was good.
No, we're all linked, aren't we? Okay. Sounds good. We'll try that. Hopefully that'll work. And we will be going live very quickly here. All right, you guys ready? I'm toggling on right now. Hello, welcome. We're glad that you're here with us, joining us for Wednesday night. Doing our follow-up, starting out our series that we started this past Sunday called One Another. We're looking at a bunch of different phrases from the New Testament. There's tons of them. I think I saw somewhere said over 100.
There's about 100 of them, and I was trying to think. I think there's about 40 different kinds. We're picking out the big ones.
Yeah,
They're all over.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different kinds, and all of them are even, some of them even fit in kind of subcategories of other ones that fit together. So we're going to focus in really on 9. It's a 10-week series. We're focusing on 9, and then we're even going to spend 1 week focusing on the things that we're told not to do to one another, which I think is also very valuable.
Those are fun.
Yeah, those are. We'll probably laugh a little bit more during those, but that's good. Anything else we need to say before we jump in? You said you got some humor to start us.
I do, but I was saddened deeply to find out that 2 of my pictures didn't transport over to this. So I can only show 2 of the 4.
Yeah.
And which means that everybody here is going to be lacking.
They're only going to get half of the amount.
Only
of
get
humor.
half. And one of them that stayed is the weakest of them all.
Do you remember what they were? Could you tell us what the ones are that you don't see?
It won't matter.
Okay.
G.K. Chesterton, one of my favorites. The Bible tells us to love our neighbors and to love our enemies, probably because they're generally the same person.
Yeah.
That's
That does seem to be the story quite often, right?
Yeah.
It really is.
Have you ever had a major issue with a neighbor?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but I go out of my way to befriend my neighbors just because it makes life better.
Well, probably the reason that those who are not as far away are not our enemies is because they're so far away.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would seem to me.
It's kind of like asking if you have any surviving enemies.
And this is one
Okay.
here is really, really funny, but you're not seeing it because it didn't show up. And then I've got, and this was the weakest of them, but it was still cute. A new command I give you, Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. That's a direct quote from the Gospel of John. And one of the disciples says, well, Jesus, what if they're gay or a different religion or have less money than me or don't have a home or a different color skin or were born in a different country or vote for someone I don't like? And Jesus responds, did I stutter?
Yeah. That one's not funny because it's too on target.
Yeah. Now, so that was 1.5 humorous memes out of 4.
And you can't remember the other 2.
Well, sure, but it's not going to do any good. I mean, I can sit here and I can probably tell you what they are, but that they're not as funny without seeing the pictures.
That's fair.
I guarantee you.
Okay.
I'll show them next week. I'll go over the top of your program and I'll say what they are.
That's fine.
In any case, as Ben mentioned, we're going to kick it off with the one another verses. And as he also mentioned, they are all over the New Testament, about 100 of these things, okay? And they're basically in all the writers you find them. Obviously Jesus got it started. We're going to see that. And then, but Paul and Peter and John, major writers, James, they all pick it up. They got the point. This is something that Christians are, Jesus followers, they do. This is one of the things that characterize us. We're going to see that too. And when Ben was laying out this series, the Love One Another series, he kicked it off with Love One Another for good reason, because it's the big dog of all of the one another's. In fact, it is repeated 13 times in the New Testament. And in fact, one of the slides that I decided not to put on the screen listed all 13 of them. It just showed love one another, love one another, love one another, showed the different verses and says, people are looking for the centerpiece of the New Testament. It's kind of there, right? That's really, really big. And
it's also one of the defining pieces of what makes Jesus' message so different and unique.
Yes, absolutely.
It's what, and then likewise should be that piece that makes the church so very unique.
And so, we start thinking about it. There's a couple of reasons for this. When you talk about getting started as a Jesus follower, most of the time people today think about, I am starting life with God. What they don't always connect to that is anytime you do life with God, you also gain brothers and sisters. You can't have God as daddy without getting brothers and sisters who are also calling God their dad, right? And so you don't just connect with God, you connect with the family of God. Now, a lot of people try to do one without the other. That's not God's plan. God linked the two. If you become, if you choose me as your dad, you're going to have brothers and sisters that are responsible for you and that you are responsible to. This is something we do together. This is huge. Okay? And so you see a lot of people trying to be Lone Ranger Christians. They try to love God and diss the church, and the Bible's going to tell us you can't do that. In fact, one of my favorite quotes came from an old preacher that I listened to Promise Keepers one time, and he went, together we're a whole lot stronger, a whole lot smarter, a whole lot better. This is a team game, not an individual sport. Barry, you guys want to add to that?
Well, I was just thinking of going back to the illustration that Jesus gave us, and there's something of a similarity there, in that yes, Jesus went to be by himself to prepare and recharge and so forth, take care of himself, but it was also that he could interact with others.
Yeah.
There isn't any emphasis on being by yourself, just you and God, to the exclusion of others.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It sounds to me a lot like when you get married in your relationship with your spouse. Oftentimes you're very excited to add them to your family and to start a family with them. Their extended family is part of that package deal. You get an extended family too, whether you like that or not, right? It comes along with these other people that you're connected to. And there's a sense in which I think our culture struggles with this. I think other cultures do better with this, where there's a value of the larger family unit and the way that they support, the way they encourage, the way that they help. And there's a sense in which sometimes we want to be those leaders. We want to break away so much to start our new family, but we miss the value that comes in the larger family surrounded.
Right.
I just think of how it sounds if I went up to somebody and who's married and she says, I like you and I want you to be my friend, but I can't stand your kids. I don't want them to have any part of me. And that's kind of what a lot of people do with God. His kids are precious to him, and you can't be good with the dad without and blow off his kids and diss them at the same time. It's just that's just something that I think is becoming lost, but it is so very, very important to the Christian life. And so let's move on here. Like I said, this is the big dog, and this is found 13 times as a kind of imperative. Usually it's just a flat-out imperative. Even when it is not listed as an imperative, as a command, it's in a command context, okay? But you'll find Jesus starting it off 4 times, and he gives us this command. This new command is what he calls it. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. By this everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another, okay? The fact is, this is in the last words of Jesus with the disciples before, right before they eat the Last Supper, right before he goes to the cross. And as a lot of people have pointed out, the last words, what I want you to really hang on to, what are the things that kind of rise to the top? Don't forget these things. These are so important. Last words of Jesus. And this theme of love one another comes up 4 times in those chapters, 13, 14, and 15. Basically, twice in 13 and twice in 15. And these are part of the last words of Jesus, so incredibly important. And he's going to explain why they are so incredibly important to him. But this whole thing of love one another, that's not just something that started with, Paul thought it was a good idea, or James thought it was a good idea, or Peter thought it was a good idea. This is something that our Lord said as a command I'm giving you, do it. Right? In the same way I love you, you must. You must do it my way. And so right there, just the fact that Jesus starts it off. Paul, he comes in and he repeats it twice. Okay? Remember, Jesus said, this is what we do. Peter does it twice. John does it 5 times in his letters. Okay? 5 times he repeats this command of Jesus. And so, this breadth of the disciples picked this up as an absolutely critical piece. This doing life with God must include loving one another. You guys got anything on that?
Well, I would even add a little bit to that. And you look at Jesus saying that in John 13 and 15 4 different times. And then he follows that up with this prayer, the longest prayer we have from Jesus in John 17. And he may not use the words love one another, but his entire or a large chunk of his prayer is for the disciples and that they would be unified, which is going to require a love for one another. Mm-hmm. He then even prays for us. He prays for the future church and what that looks like. And he prays that we would be one, that we would be united. And just again, he's reinforcing that same kind of a thing. It's interesting that we talk about this being kind of the central core piece of his ministry, which I think you see it in practical terms with how he treats people. But it's that last night of his life when he really cements it in. It's kind of that final stamp of approval. This is what I'm about, and this is what you're going to be about.
Exactly. Excellent. You got anything else on that, Ben?
Yeah, thinking about love here being a commandment or an imperative, that we're not told that we also have to like the person. We don't have to approve of them. We don't have to understand them or anything else. The whole point is to love.
Yeah, we're going to get there and spend some time there because that is an incredibly important point to make. You have to understand when he says, I'm telling you to love one another, what's he saying? Okay? What kind of a relationship is he setting up? What kind of a emotion is he setting up? What kind of a choice is he setting up? Those are the kind of questions that you're going to have to ask in order for this to make sense. Mm-hmm. Okay? Let's move on. Exactly where you went, okay? Because when he says, love one another, I'm going to go back to that verse. A new command that I give you, agape one another. That's the word that he uses, agapao, which is a verb form of the noun agape. As I have agaped you, you must agape one another. By this, everyone's going to know you're my disciples if you agape one another. The reason I'm saying that, in English it sounds stupid. Okay, I'm just repeating the word love. But in Greek, there are several different words for love. He doesn't say, I'm giving you a new commandment, eros one another. Mm-hmm. Okay, which was a sensual love, a feeling love, a sexual love. Mm-hmm. He's not saying phileo one another, be friends with one another. He's not saying even storge one another, which is this notion of, you got an uncle, he's weird, but he's family. Okay? It's not a family kind of love.
Which you could apply to the context of a church family.
You could.
Again, that's not where he's going.
But Jesus didn't use those terms. In fact, the term he used is probably the rarest of the words for love in that day. They didn't talk a lot about agape. And Jesus chose a form of love that was not ubiquitous in that world, that was not talked about in that world, that was not cherished, beloved in that world. And he made it the centerpiece of how we are to treat one another. So when he says love one another, we tend to think one of these others. Mm-hmm. Be friends, right? Mm-hmm. Have feelings for one another, right? As you mentioned, like one another. Or, your family, so tolerate that weird uncle. He's using the term agape. And so we hear love, and we think this term that we define. Mm-hmm. Jesus says love one another, and he's speaking of a very, very specific kind of love for each other.
And that's important.
It's huge.
I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it seems to me that the Eskimos have like 600 words for snow.
Yeah.
And camel drivers in the Middle East have 300 or 400 words for the different parts of a camel's saddle. So if it's that central to your life, you're going to have a lot of words to describe it, and you're going to use the right ones.
Well, what we don't want to do is import one of our foreign notions of love and make that center to what Jesus says. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, you said he's not telling us to like one another. And there is a radical distinction between agape and like. Okay, there is one. Because liking basically is when you like somebody, you connect in some fashion. They're doing something for you, something that benefits you or intrigues you or that you connect with.
You get a benefit from.
You get a benefit from, exactly. They're you like the way they look, you like the way they behave, you like the way they treat you, you like the way they talk, you admire something about them. There's something worthy about them that attracts you to them. It has to do with their attractiveness, is like. And when somebody doesn't talk good to you or that kind of stuff, you don't like them.
Yeah.
Right?
That's would be more like phileo, right? Friendship.
Friendship is just you have stuff in common. I usually describe, this is kind of weird, but friendship is a shoulder-to-shoulder love where you see life similarly and you do tasks together and this kind of thing. Eros tends to be a face-to-face love. Okay, agape tends to be a mama holding a baby love. I'm sorry, storge is a mother holding a baby love. I'm sorry about that. Agape it's a choice love. I am going to work for your best, irrespective of what I think about you. I'm going to work for your best, irrespective of what you think about me. Okay?
That's a tough one.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult. But basically the whole idea, instead of being a self-centered love, it is a other-focused love.
Even sacrificial.
Even
I think
sacrificial,
that's
exactly.
a big piece of it. It's the idea of sacrificial love. I know that you tied it a little bit Sunday to the idea of charity, which again is a completely foreign concept in the world that Jesus enters into, and by the time he leaves, he's got this group of people who are charitable in ways that hadn't really been seen in history. And so I think that's a great picture of what agape is. It's not doing something for someone because you like them like you would a friend, and that there's something mutually beneficial out of that, or that you would even a child, or that you would your spouse. It's doing something for someone really with no expectation of anything back.
No expectation of return, because irrespective of how they have treated you, they are still valuable to God. They have value. They bear the image of God. Okay? Now, when I said it's not an emotion, I hesitated just a hair for this reason. One of the things that sometimes I used to do our divorce care thing decades ago. Okay? And one of the things when you talk about forgiveness, forgiveness is a process, and it starts out where, okay, God, I guess I'll try. That's a great first step, right?
Yeah.
Eventually you'll make it to, well, God, I guess I won't pray that you kill him anymore. There reaches a point when, God, I guess I don't even mind if they can be happy occasionally. When you start praying not at people or against people, but for people, it's amazing how some of the emotions can soften. Emotions don't lead, but if you genuinely agape, eventually they may follow.
That has to do with forgiveness is really about you, the forgiver.
Yeah. That's exactly right. But the whole agape, I don't want to divorce it entirely, okay?
Yeah.
But it's just emotions don't lead with agape. I'm not going to separate them entirely, okay? It's just that you keep choosing to do good for. You keep choosing to recognize value in, irrespective of their misbehavior. And it's incredibly difficult love. That's why I said Jesus following isn't for wusses. Because all of the rest of these loves are simple by comparison. They're easy. Okay? This is the toughest form of love. And because it's the toughest form of love, it is also the most durable. It's the strongest, infinitely more powerful than the other kinds of love. If you master this kind of love, It is absolutely amazing. The other ones flow way more easily. Okay, and the other ones are going to crack. They're going to break. They're going to come and go. Agape by nature cannot come and go. It's there.
Do you think that's in part why God allows us in situations where we have those difficult people that we need to love? Because if we didn't, we probably wouldn't develop that type of love.
I'm not sure that God made you sin to make me more forgiving.
Well, it's a
Maybe.
starting point.
Now, I think he can use your belligerence to make me more forgiving. But I don't think when you say, did God bring those things into my life to shape me, I'm not sure that God causes problems so he'll grow me up, usually.
Well, there's enough problems just lying around
Exactly.
that we'll run into.
There's
Yeah,
plenty.
we live in a broken world. You're
God's
going to
gonna
trip
use
across them one way or the other.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is one of the, as we talk about agape and everything else, for me it brings to mind the idea of conflict within the context of a church family. There's going to be conflict, and sometimes there's people within your church family that you don't like. We don't always get along. I want to take that back to the John 13 passage that we started with, and the John 17 as he's praying for unity. The very way that we will look different from the world isn't that we will always get along. It's that we are committed to one another even when we don't get along.
Yes.
That's unique from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
That's the power of an agape
Huge.
love. Everyone else is basing their love and their commitment to one another off of whether or not it's to their benefit. When we choose to love, even when it isn't to our benefit, that's what causes other people outside of that family to kind of sit up and take notice. That's when we actually look most like Jesus.
And if you look at it, one of the things I wanted to point out by the verses that I put on there, if you want a definition of agape, it's this phrase, as I have loved you. How does God love you? How does Jesus love you? Jesus doesn't like me because I'm so likable. Because occasionally I've been told I'm not, which is really weird, but I've been told that.
There are haters, so just
I
move
know,
on.
I know. But the fact is, I give Jesus plenty of reason to be annoyed, right? And so the unconditionalness of God's love for me, his valuing me despite my squandering that value so frequently. If you want to know what agape looks like, just look at Jesus. Look at how he treated his disciples. Look at what he did for us, As I have loved you, that's agape.
It's also durable.
Is what?
Durable.
Durable. Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
And the other word that I don't know if we've emphasized enough is the word choice. Agape is not something you feel, it's something you do. It's irrespective of my feeling, I'm going to do what's best for you. I'm going to do what is right in the sight of God. Agape means I'm going to act the right thing. My emotions may or may not follow. I hope they will. Okay? But that's not the leading edge of agape.
You just quoted an old country music song.
Did I really?
90s. Yeah, it's either Clint Black or George Strait. I don't
I
remember
think it
which
was.
one.
I think it was George Black.
There we go. But he has a song. He says, "Love isn't something that we have; it's something that we do."
Oh, I like
and
that.
it's a mental decision to love.
I wonder if he listened to
when
our
it's not
stuff.
30 years in the future. maybe he did.
Might be that powerful,
Maybe. Yeah.
All right, let's go on. Okay. Now, this is how important it is. This is the way the Apostle John puts it. He says, if we say we love God but hate others, we're liars. Lying to ourselves, lying to you, I don't know. Because he says we can't love God, whom we have not seen, if we don't love others whom we have seen. Now, as Ben mentioned this last week, because he and I have been tossing this idea around for 2 or 3 weeks. It's a fascinating thing to me, because I've been trying to figure out the connection. Why, if I love God, must I love you? Okay? Why, if I don't love you, can it be said that I don't love God? Why? God's lovable. Okay? Most of the time. God is good all
That
the
whole
time.
distance thing we talked about earlier is a little bit helpful.
Yeah. But the people around, it's easy. That's why so many people are de-churched. They love God and they hate God's people. right? Because God is not hypocritical. Every single one of God's people is.
Yeah.
God doesn't sin. Every single one of us do. Kind of good at it, right? And so what's the connection? If we say we love God but hate others, John says you're a liar. Okay, why? Why am I a liar? And we've talked about this, and we've come up with a couple of different, a couple of ways that you might want to look at it. One of them is just Jesus says, do it. If you don't do it, you're not loving God. It's a command. It's an imperative. Jesus made it as clear as he could be. I'm telling you, you must love one another. And I say, no. And so Jesus says, and you don't love me.
I feel like I just got a glimpse of 3-year-old Doc. That was great.
I'm not sure that I've changed dramatically. 67 years later.
Yeah.
But it could be as simple as that. Okay? I told you to. I don't want to. If you love me, okay? I know that one sounds weird to me. It really does. Now, one of the things that Ben played with, and I might be putting words into his mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong. He says, okay. He says, well, one of the ways that I love my wife is to try to develop a fondness for what she loves. And so, I try to do things that she enjoys because I love her. Okay. Now, is that accurate, Ben?
I think that's fair, and I think you can apply it in other contexts as well. But when you think about the fact that God tells us to love one another, he loves the people who aren't me, and so he wants me to love the people who aren't me. I think of one of the ways I can show my love to my wife is to show interest in the things that mean something to her. I think that maybe takes to a different place even when you think about your kids. There's some things that my kids have interest in that I don't care about, but I show a little bit of interest in because I love them. And so
You're a better dad than I am a grandfather.
Grow to love some of those. Well, okay. So you have that. I think that applies in friendships. I think of several things in my life that I enjoy doing that started because I had a friend who liked it, and so I had some interest because they liked it. And eventually it got me into it. I could talk about different games, disc golf, that kind of stuff.
So if that feeds you,
I think there's a way.
So if that feeds you, that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel a lot better now about the fact that I watched The Notebook starting to end for my wife.
They're just lines. They're just lines you draw. Okay.
The problem Doc has with this one is that that's not a requirement of love, which is true. You don't have to love everything that someone else loves to be able to love them.
In fact, if you do, you're weird.
That's where it breaks down, is that God kind of makes a clear, defined line. If you don't love others, then you can't love me. Right. And that's where these analogies, the ways that I'm playing with this, I think fail.
The other one is that, and this one intrigues me, I don't have it laid out still, even though I've been playing with it for a while, is that you were created by God to be like him. Okay? The fact is, we were created in the image of God to be godly, to be godlike, so that his character, we are at our best when we reflect his character. We are at our best when we do what he would do, when we become his hands and his feet. That's what we were made to be, as godlike creatures in the image of God, of all the creatures on the earth. And so I'm wondering if it's connected to that in some fashion. If you love me, okay, if I'm the center of who you are, then you're going to reflect me. You're going to be like me. You're going to be who you were made to be. Now, there's weaknesses in that one too, which I can spot, okay? Nevertheless, it's an intriguing trail in my mind.
What about this? We're to be in the image of God. Fine. God, for the sake of this discussion, is the Trinity. And each person of the Trinity loves one another. And so if we are in the image of God, we are going to love those in our family.
It's interesting.
Interesting thought.
John says something similar to that in the 1 John chapter 1, where if we have fellowship with him, we'll walking in the light, we'll have fellowship with him, we'll have fellowship with one another. Those kind of connections are made right there.
The whole image of God thing to me is also interesting because I think there's a sense in which if we're created in the image of God, then there's something about us, however broken or however much we distort it, there's something about us that images God in this world. And so it doesn't make sense to suggest that you love God, but you don't love the things that best image him in this world, even as much as we screw that up. I think that's a significant piece in all this too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's keep going. Are there exceptions? Okay.
That's all we really care about. What are the exceptions?
Who do I not? Who do I don't have to love? And so I know one of the things is, well, when he says love one another, he's primarily talking about Jesus followers. He's talking about the church. I'm telling you, disciples, love one another. He's not talking about the whole world there. He's just saying, by this the world will know that you are my disciples because you love for one another. He's talking about inter-church love, inter-family love, right?
Yep.
And now does that mean I don't have to love those who are outside? That's the big question, okay? But listen to what he says, because one of the points that we made is that even though there are priorities, we're going to get to this in a minute. You always love God first. You love your one another's within the church second. That doesn't mean you don't have to love those outside. It doesn't mean that, because Jesus even said this. He said, you've heard the law that says love your neighbor and hate your enemy. In other words, love your one another's, but don't love anybody who's not one of your one another's, which is how most people do life, right?
And again, as you pointed out, was very acceptable within the world that they were living in at that time.
Normal.
They had teaching that suggested if they're not of us, then they don't deserve our kindness or affection.
Exactly. And you can still find that in some cultures where they are bound to be nice to people inside their circle, but they have no obligation whatsoever to be decent to people outside their circle.
You know, when we ask this kind of question, we're usually really asking, who is it I can hate?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And that, for me, is off target to begin with, because we're talking about our neighbors, and neighbors have to do with proximity, not their qualities. The fact they are there makes them a neighbor.
That you're doing life with them.
Yeah.
But listen to what Jesus says. Jesus says, you've heard the law that says, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. That kind of gets rid of the exception clause.
Yeah.
He says, pray for those who persecute you, and in that way you'll be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. Like father, like children, image of God stuff, right? That's the way I am with you guys, he says, because God gives sunlight to both the evil and the good. He sends rain on both the just and the unjust. That's how God is, okay? Be like God, right? And then he goes on a little bit and he says, if you only love those who love you, our standard, eros, philos, even storge, what reward is there for that? Even tax collectors do that much. In that world, they would have been the worst. If you are, almost in our world, if you're kind only to, I'm sorry, that was cool. If you're kind only to your friends, how are you different than that? Pagans do that.
Yeah, that's because everybody comprehends phileo.
Yeah.
Everyone comprehends eros.
Eros. Yeah, makes
Everyone
sense.
comprehends the storge. Yeah, everyone
But
does that.
agape?
Yep.
But I want you to be like God, image of God. You are to be perfect like Dad, he says. Take it up a level. And so when you say, are there exceptions? What does Jesus say? This agape is not a strategy. It is not a way to make people more peaceful. It is not, I've had people, I've done marriage counseling before, and they're at war with each other. And I've talked about the fact that this kind of love is unconditional. You show them this kind of love even if they never, ever reciprocate, because that's who we are and what we do. What they'll do is, I tried loving them unconditionally, but it didn't work, and so I'm done.
It didn't work for me.
It didn't meet the conditions.
Which means it wasn't unconditional,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All of us will try it as a strategy. I'll be nice to you to see if you're nice back, but if you're not nice to me, I'm going to waste you. Okay? And he says anybody can do that, all right? How are you different? by this you will know that the world will know you're my disciples, because you guys treat each other differently. You treat the world differently. You've got this attitude which is weird. It's so weird that it's almost godlike. Go figure. Because God's really weird, right?
Compared to the what was going on back 2,000 years
To
ago.
the weird, God seems weird.
Yeah.
To the twisted, God seems twisted.
I still get some weird vibes now and then.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think there's a progression, okay? And I'm going to add a couple things to this progression. I think the progression is, it's like Jesus said, greatest commandments, right? Love God first, love your neighbor. I think you can break that second one down into two pieces, and I think you can see a lot of different places in the New Testament where you can support that. For example, these love one another's is one of those places where you can support that. You love God first, you love family, Christian family second, and you love other one another's third. Now, there's a couple of caveats here that I want to suggest, and you guys go ahead and tear into them if you think they are tearing doable.
Okay.
Oh,
You love God first. And I read one guy who said, we cannot love each other best unless we love God most. You cannot love your wife best unless you love God more. You can't love your children best unless you love God best. Okay? That a love for another person always has to flow out of a love for God first. Do you guys buy that?
Yeah, I buy that. Absolutely.
yeah.
And we have a whole lot of people in our culture, a lot of people in the church who will place love for family above love for God.
Yeah. Well, you still take that kind of template out, and you look at the family, and you think about the spouse relationship, and how a husband and wife are supposed to love each other premier first, and then children flow out of that. I've seen lots of messed up marriages because the husband or the wife have chosen to love something else other than the spouse first. Not necessarily talking about God here, but we're talking about I've seen mothers who love their kids more than they love their husband. That eats out of marriage. I've seen husbands who've loved their jobs more than their wife. That eats out of marriage. There's an appropriate, I don't know how do you say that.
If you genuinely love God most, it is not going to deteriorate your love for your wife or your kids.
It's going to benefit. It makes it better. It makes you have a healthier relationship with your children if you love your spouse more than you love your children.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you've got these different tiers in place, God being the top, if you actually focus on starting at a lower tier from which your love flows, it's going to be flawed.
Yes, exactly right, Ben. And the second one, if you love your family one another second, and I ran across this, I'm not sure I ran across it or whether I made it up. If I did, it was pretty smart.
Well, let's go with that.
But I probably stole it.
I think it's my idea.
And here it is. If you are not loving your family one another's, then loving one another's outside the family doesn't impress God. Which means there are a lot of people who try to be loving to people outside because they want to look good. But if you diss the family of God, God doesn't give you credit for loving outsiders and dissing his kids.
That takes us right back to kind of where we started in the conversation about the de-churched, the people who've left church and they feel like they can love God without being involved with a family of believers.
And I take
And
care
I-
of
yeah.
I take care of the poor, and I visit the sick, and I take care of my neighbor and all this kind of stuff, and they blow off the family of God. My suggestion is if you're not loving the family of God, you don't get super credit because you're loving the outsiders and disrespecting the family of God.
Because that's not in the image of God.
It is not.
And it's not a great witness to people who are outside of the family of God.
No.
It's a negative testimony.
And then the other one is, the third is to love other one another's. Because, like I said, it's not a strategy. This is a character. In the image of God, we try to love like God loves. In the image of God, we try to love who God loves. Not touchy-feely, not eros, not friendship love, not storge love. We try to do what's best for those that God has created. We want their best. We want them to be connected with God. We want them to have a great life. We want God's best for people. Now, that doesn't mean that we support all of their silliness. That's not their best. But we genuinely want what's best. We have to treat those who were created in the image of God. I mean, those of us who were created in the image of God have to treat others like they were created in the image of God. There's a respect and a value, a worth, because they're God's kids. They're pretty stupid right now. They're pretty messed up right now. They're kind of hurtful right now, but they're still God's kids, right? And I want their best. Now, that doesn't mean I want them to succeed in sin. I want their best. Does that make sense? Okay? If you're doing something, and we have people who, if you love me, you're going to support my sin. No, I don't.
That's
I
just
don't.
manipulative.
I want your best. I want God's best for you. I want your best as defined by God.
It's like encouraging your kids not to do their homework because they don't want to.
Exactly. That's not love. Yeah. Or it's kind of like a person who is choosing a path of sin, and they say, if you love me, you're gonna support me. No, I will not support you because I love you.
Yeah. Or I'm gonna like the Cowboys because you like the Cowboys.
Well, that is true, because God likes the Cowboys.
There's some honor in
if
that.
it was only me, that'd be the case, but God loves the Cowboys.
There's a hole in their stadium so you can watch them.
That's exactly it.
Because otherwise, because God can't see through metal structures.
You're mocking and you're a Texan. That's just not right.
I'm just giving you a hard time. It's all right.
Now,
It's funny. When this actually occurs, I think that very often you see grace at work.
oh yeah, absolutely. Which is why God is prodigal with grace. He's extravagant. He's lavish with grace because of agape, right? Yeah. He loves us that way. We want to love him that way. Now, one slide before we get to our closing stuff. What difference does it make? If you genuinely agape your spouse, what will it do to your marriage? What if it defines, what if that is your highest kind of love in a marriage? Not eros, not philos. He's my best friend. I hear that nonsense all the time. My spouse is my best friend. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Do you agape your spouse? Okay, philos is cool. Eros is really cool, right? Philos is cool. Agape is the cement that puts it together and makes this thing work for the best of both partners. All right? Mm-hmm. All right. And so what difference would it make if you actually made agape the highest form? What would it do with your children if you agape them? Mm-hmm. Okay. What would it do to your colleagues? How is it going to change the way you treat your colleagues at work? How is it going to change the way you treat your nemesis at work? Mm-hmm. If you don't like them, you don't like what they do, but you want God's best for them, and I'm going to pray for God's best for them. Not going to pray that they succeed in their nemesis behavior, but I'm going to pray for God's best for them. Okay? Mm-hmm. And hopefully it'll deaden some of your hateful feelings, because hateful feelings are no credit to the people of God.
Yeah.
Right?
And the more you surrender to this, the more you just seem to become more Christ-like.
I would hope so.
It's amazing how
as I have loved you, right?
Yes.
It's amazing as when we try to do the things that Jesus does, it softens our heart and it makes us actually those real things. Sometimes you do things out of obligation, out of your own personal effort, out of the feeling that you have to. It's the choice thing. And over time, you find it less and less of that choice. It becomes more and more natural to you.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yep.
It works that way.
Mitch Parker says that he's a Cowboys fan. He wants to know when they vote on me.
Mitch, you have 1 year to stir up all of the trouble that you want because of his belligerence on the Cowboys.
I could pretend to be a Cowboys fan for a year. I could fake that for a year.
You've already let the cat out of the bag, and we will not let people
Nope, I just
that.
had a miraculous conversion right now. I felt it.
Ben, want to finish us up?
Yeah, this Sunday's our last staycation. We're doing Cupcake Wars. If you want to bring in cupcakes, make sure they're here before noon on Friday at the building so we can taste those and judge those appropriately. We also
They don't have to sign up, do they? They can just bring them in by
There's
Friday?
a registration to sign up. If you don't register to sign up and you just show up with some cupcakes, we'll accept them.
That's kind of because I told a dad that today,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to be too deceitful, so I was going to mandate that if they hadn't signed up but brought them in on time, we were still going to accept them.
I think
I
that's
also
fair.
told him that I take bribes.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
Isn't
I
it
can
a
be
sin
bought.
to turn away cupcakes?
Oh, that's the deal.
Feels right, yeah.
But as far as in the judging, I did remind him I can be bought.
Well,
I had
truth.
I had someone tell me today that if you eat cupcakes before 10 a.m., it's considered a muffin. Or maybe it was noon. I don't even know. But we're going to be doing that this Sunday. We're going to have cupcakes, and for breakfast or muffins. So you've got that going on. We have our Jesus Prom event that's coming up in about 10 days. It's a really big deal. Really need people to sign up and be a part of that. This is the kind of thing that I know we push a lot and say it's all hands on deck. You don't want to miss this. This is good for you. You're going to be grateful you're a part of it. You're going to be grateful that you got to see it and be a part. And quite frequently, our people who volunteer in this can't wait for the next year.
And I'm
so
pretty
sign up for
sure
that.
I am pretty sure that God will get you time out of purgatory for it.
Yep. And so that and 2 weeks from tonight is when our live classes on Wednesday are starting. We have our meals at 5:30, classes at 6:30. Our support groups start at that 6 o'clock or 6:15 time frame. And I think that also means that we are not doing this next Wednesday. Well, is that correct?
Oh, I don't know. That's up to you. I can't because I'm going to be teaching a class.
He's doing some training stuff. I don't think we're doing this next Wednesday. I think we're not doing this. I think I'm going to sit in on the training stuff. So we've got some of that going on. So we will see you back 2 weeks from tonight in person. We'll still be streaming live if you can't be there, but we'll have that going on. Thanks for joining us, guys. We appreciate it. We'll see you hopefully Sunday morning.